Imagine an owner comes to me and says, Danielle, we have $5 million we could spend on this project. Okay. My next question is, what does that $5 million need to pay for? Because if you are thinking that because you have a $5 million budget, we can spend $5 million on construction, we may already have a problem. Construction cost and total project cost are not necessarily the same thing. And understanding that difference before you start designing can save you difficult decisions later. Welcome back to Before You Build. I am Danielle Gittens, professional engineer, certified construction manager, and owner of Brewington Management Company. And today we are talking about a question that every owner needs to answer. Can you actually afford the project you are planning? Construction cost is not project costs. That's one of the first things I want project owners to understand is that the construction cost is not necessarily the same as the total project budget. Because let's just say you have $5 million available for a project. The question isn't simply, what can we build for $5 million? The question is, what does this $5 million need to cover? Because the contractor's construction contract may only be one portion of the overall project investment. You're going to have architects, engineers, your owner's rep, your construction management team, testing and inspections, permitting and fees, surveying, geotechnical services, environmental services, furniture, fixtures, artwork, technology, equipment, security, moving or relocation services, temporary facilities, utility-related costs. And depending on the project, the owner may have other expenses that are not included in the contractor's construction number. Not every project will have the same list of items or budget, and that's important. I'm not giving you a universal checklist saying that every owner needs to account for every item I named. I'm saying that you need to understand your project so that you can determine what costs apply to you. Because if the overall total funding is $5 million and you spend $5 million in construction, who's paying for everything else? That's the distinction. The construction cost is one component of the overall project budget. And the owner's job is to understand and know the entire financial picture. Where does all the money go? And this is where owners can be surprised. Some costs are obvious. You know you're going to need a contractor. You probably know you're going to need an architect or engineer. But there are other costs that are surrounding the construction itself. If you are renovating an occupied building, do the people need to move out temporarily? And if they need to move, where are they moving? Do you need to rent temporary space? Are there temporary utilities? What about moving costs? Is there new furniture and equipment? Does your IT infrastructure need to change? What about security, access control, data, specialty equipment? Are there any permits or any agency fees, testing, inspections, commissioning? And these aren't questions that I'm asking because every project needs the same answer. I'm asking these so owners can start identifying things that are required before the project budget is committed. And here's something else. Timing matters. If you are planning for a project that's not going to start construction for another year or two, the cost environment can be different than the cost environment is when you are actually doing the planning. And this is something that project team members need to actually account for and expect, right? The bigger point is this. Don't build your budget around one construction number and then assume that everything else will just somehow fit around it. Build the budget around the project. What are we trying to accomplish? What will it take to accomplish this? What costs belong to the owner? What costs belong to the construction contract? What professional services will we need for this project? What other investments are going to be required to make sure that this project actually works? And that's how you begin developing a more realistic picture. Contingency is not extra money. Now let's talk about contingency. because this is where I think project owners misunderstand the budget. Contingency is not extra money. It's not a pot of money we keep around so we can add more things to the project later. Contingency exists because projects have uncertainty, especially early in planning. We don't know everything yet. You haven't completed the design. You don't fully understand existing conditions. You don't know what's behind walls. There may be market conditions that change, unforeseen conditions. There may be decisions that haven't been made yet. The project becomes more defined as you move through planning and design. But early on, there are still unknowns, and unknowns create risks. That's why I want owners to think about contingency as part of their risk management. Not bonus money, not wish list money, risk management money. And the amount and type of contingency appropriate for each project depends on a project. A renovation of an older occupied facility may have a different risk profile than a new construction on a well-understood site. A project early in conceptual planning may have different uncertainty than a project with completed construction documents. That's why I'm not going to sit here and give you a percentage and tell you that's the right contingency for every project. It isn't that simple. The project team needs to evaluate the risks and uncertainties associated with the project. But here's something that I will tell you. If you treat your contingency like extra money at the beginning of the project, don't be surprised when you need it later and it isn't there. At some point during planning, you may uncover or discover something that you do not want to hear. You may find out that the project you're planning is costing more than the funds that you have available. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Finding out early can be very valuable because now you have options. Maybe the scope changes. Maybe the project gets phased. Maybe certain improvements happen now and others happen later. Maybe the owner identifies additional funding. Maybe certain requirements get reconsidered. Maybe the schedule changes. There are different ways a project team can respond, but the key is having this conversation early while you still have choices. What you don't want to do is spend months designing a project, get everybody excited about a solution, and then discover that you can't afford to build it because now that conversation is much, much harder. You spent money on a design. You spent time. Stakeholders have expectations. People are attached to a solution. And now you're trying to take things away. And that's a very different conversation from saying during planning, here's what we want. Here's what we believe it costs. Here's what funding we have available. And do all these things align? And if they don't align, let's address it now. This is where having the right professional team around an owner makes a difference, and it matters. A good project team shouldn't simply keep designing and hope the budget works its way out in the end. We should be helping the owner understand the financial implications of the design decisions that the project develops, because every design decision has the potential to affect something: cost, schedule, operations, maintenance, risk. And the goal isn't simply to design a project. The goal is to develop a project that the owner can actually deliver. The budget is a decision-making tool. And that's why I don't think owners should look at the budget as just a spreadsheet someone updates once a month. The budget is a decision-making tool. It helps you evaluate choices throughout the project. Can we afford this option? If we add this scope, what happens somewhere else? If this system costs more but has operational benefits, what does that mean for the owner? If we make this change, what are we giving up? If this project cost increase, where's the additional funds coming from? Those are owner decisions. And good financial information helps owners make them. The budget also helps establish priorities because most projects have constraints. You may not be able to have everything. So, what's most important? What's required? What's a nice to have? What supports the organization mission? What improves operations? What reduces risks? And what can wait? Those conversations are much easier when the project team understands the owner's priorities and their financial framework. And that's why budgeting needs to start early. Not after design, not when the bids come in, not when somebody realizes they're over budget, early. The more clearly you understand your available funding, your project costs, your priorities, and your risks, the better equipped you are to make decisions as the project develops. So, if you're an owner planning a project, here are some questions I will want you to start asking. First, how much funding do you actually have available? Not how much you hope to have, but how much funding you actually have and how much funding still needs to be secured. Second, what does the funding need to pay for? Construction, design, project management, testing, furniture, technology, relocation, equipment, other owner costs. Identify the categories that apply to your project. Third, what don't we know yet? Existing conditions, final scope, market conditions, agency requirements. Those unknowns are risks. Fourth, what are our priorities? What absolutely has to happen? What would we like to happen? And what could potentially be deferred if necessary? And finally, does the project we are envisioning align with the resources we actually have? Those are conversations. You don't need to have every answer on day one, but you do need to start asking those questions. If there's one thing that I want you to take away from this episode, it's this. Before you start designing what you want to build, make sure you understand what you're actually prepared to invest. Your construction cost is not necessarily the total project cost. Your contingency is not extra money. And discovering that your scope and budget are not aligned are easier to address earlier in the project than it is after months of design. A realistic project budget gives you something incredibly valuable. The ability to make informed decisions. That's what it gives you. And that's really what this entire Before You Build series is about. Helping owners ask better questions before the most expensive decisions are made. And good projects don't start with construction. They start with clarity. If you're planning a construction project, a renovation, or a capital improvement, I hope this gives you questions to take back to your team. And I'd actually like to hear from you. What project cost surprised you the first time you were responsible for a construction project? Leave it in the comments. Your answer may help another project owner, or it may be a topic for a future episode. If this video was helpful, please subscribe to my channel, like and share this video with someone who's planning a construction project. And if you haven't watched the first 2 episodes of Before You Build, go back and watch those as well. Episode 1, we're talking about understanding your existing facility before construction begins. And episode 2 is about making sure you're solving the right problem and thinking about who's going to operate and maintain a facility after construction. And now in episode 3, we're asking you another question. Can you afford the project you are planning? I'm Danielle Gittens, a professional engineer, certified construction manager, and owner of Burlington Management Company. And I'll see you in the next episode of Before You Build.